Right now, a lot is happening behind the scenes with this team, and as a fan, you feel that something needs to change. Last season showed some clear problems on offense, mainly in finishing plays and capitalizing on big opportunities. It wasn't a matter of effort, but execution. And when small mistakes keep happening week after week, they turn into major obstacles that hurt the whole team. The management knows this, the coaches know this, and I'm sure you've noticed it every Sunday too. This preseason aims to correct these details and build a more solid foundation so the team can truly compete at a higher level. But before we delve into that, make sure you've already liked this post if you've been a Denver Broncos fan for more than 20 years. It's always great to see fans of all generations here. And if that's you, leave a comment right now. Go Broncos! My heart bleeds orange and blue. Let's get straight to the point. Since Bo Nix was drafted in 2024 through the end of Week 18 in the 2025 season, the Broncos have led one of the worst statistical categories you can imagine for a young quarterback trying to develop. 75 combined wide receiver drops. 75. That averages out to 37.5 drops per season. That places this team in the top 5 over the last 2 years in a category no one wants to lead. And here's the part that should really concern you as a fan. Those are only the drops officially attributed by Pro Football Reference. Those are the ones that are counted. Think about how many borderline plays weren't labeled as drops. Realistically, you could add 5 or 6 more per player across the board. That's not just bad luck. That's a structural issue. Now connect that to another key stat from 2025. The Broncos ranked 17th in explosive play rate, sitting behind the Arizona Cardinals and just ahead of teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Cincinnati Bengals. 2 of those teams didn't even make the playoffs. When you combine drops with a middle-of-the-pack explosive play rate, you get an offense that stalls at critical moments. You get drives that should have continued but instead ended in punts. You get third downs that should have been converted but instead turned into missed opportunities. And when you break down who was responsible for these drops, it becomes even more revealing. These weren't backup players. These were starters. Sutton had 8 drops. Ingram had 8. R.J. Harvey had 7. Franklin and Bryant had 4 and 3 respectively. That is your core group. That is your starting foundation. Yes, there were other issues. We could talk about play calling under Sean Payton. We could talk about turnovers. We could talk about the lack of explosive run plays. But drop passes? That is a controllable issue. That's mechanics. That's technique. That's focus. That's roster construction. And the organization clearly understands it. The firing of the wide receivers coach and bringing in a new voice to that room is not a coincidence. That's accountability. That's an acknowledgement that something had to change. But coaching alone won't fix this. Talent infusion is necessary. If you rank the team's priorities heading into this offseason, wide receiver sits at the very top, right alongside running back and linebacker. Tight end feels like a medium priority. Offensive line depth is important, but it's not urgent. Wide receiver is urgent, and that's why this combine matters so much. There are specific prospects being closely evaluated. Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, Elijah Sarrett, Brennan Thompson, Jeremy Bernard. These are not necessarily first-round locks, but they are players who could dramatically elevate their draft stock with strong combine performances. Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State is especially intriguing. There's real speculation he could be the fastest wide receiver at the combine, potentially running sub 4.3. That kind of speed changes defensive alignments instantly. He averaged 18.5 yards per reception, stretching the field consistently, even on a Mississippi State team that struggled throughout the year. Over 1,000 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, pure vertical threat ability. Then there's Chris Brazzell, 6'5", around 200 pounds. Long, explosive, and tailor-made for what Sean Payton values in size-speed combinations. Over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns, averaging around 16.5 yards per catch with improved quarterback play from Joey Aguilar. He's raw in some areas, especially contested catches, but the upside is enormous. With added muscle and development, he could become a serious weapon. And here's the key point, Broncos country, this isn't just about adding a body. It's about protecting Bo Nix's development. A young quarterback cannot grow properly when drive after drive is derailed by drops. Confidence matters. Rhythm matters. Trust matters. In less than 24 hours, we'll hear directly from Sean Payton and George Payton at the Combine. Their words will matter, but their actions over the next few months will matter even more. Free agency, draft strategy, potential trades. The direction is becoming obvious. And this is where things get even more interesting, because it's not just about identifying the problem. It's about understanding how aggressively this front office is willing to attack it. When you look at those 75 combined drops since Bo Nix entered the league, you're not just looking at a frustrating stat. You're looking at stalled momentum. You're looking at lost trust between quarterback and receiver. You're looking at a ceiling that hasn't been reached because the foundation hasn't been stable enough. A young quarterback needs reliability more than anything. Timing routes depend on anticipation. Anticipation depends on trust. And trust disappears when the ball hits the turf. This is why wide receiver isn't just a need. It's a structural correction. And here's something else that should catch your attention. The Broncos already showed last season that they were willing to explore upgrades. Calls were made at the trade deadline. Additions were brought in throughout the year. That tells you this isn't a blind spot for the front office. They see it. They know it. But knowing and fixing are two different things. Now, let's think about the type of receiver that actually changes this offense. It's not just about speed, although someone like Brennan Thompson could absolutely stretch the field and create explosive plays. It's not just about size, although a 6'5" target like Chris Brazzell would give Bo Nix a much larger strike zone and a red zone weapon. It's about consistency. You need someone who finishes plays. Because when Sutton has 8 drops, when Ingram has 8, when RJ Harvey has 7, when Franklin and Bryant add to that total, that's not one weak link. That's a chain reaction. Defenses begin to crowd the line of scrimmage because they're not afraid of being punished consistently downfield. Safeties start cheating. Windows get tighter. Everything becomes harder. And remember, the Broncos ranked 17th in explosive play rate. That's middle of the road. That's not bad enough to panic, but it's not good enough to scare anyone. If this team truly wants to climb back into serious contention, middle of the pack won't cut it. This is where the combine becomes more than just 40-yard dash times. It becomes a testing ground for competitiveness, for hands drills, for route precision, for body control. You want to see who catches everything thrown their way. You want to see who plucks the ball cleanly away from their frame. You want to see who looks natural, not robotic. And I keep going back to the developmental timeline of Bo Nix. Year 3 is massive for a quarterback. It's when the game slows down. It's when decision-making sharpens. But that growth can stall if the supporting cast doesn't evolve with him. That's why I believe George Payton cannot afford to treat wide receiver as a secondary concern. Running back is important. Linebacker depth matters. Tight end could elevate certain packages. But none of those positions directly impact every single passing snap the way a reliable receiver does. And let's be honest with each other. The AFC is not forgiving. If you can't generate chunk plays and you can't protect your quarterback's confidence, you fall behind quickly. You can't rely solely on scheme adjustments. You can't scheme your way out of fundamental execution errors like drops. The Broncos already made one major step by changing the voice in the wide receiver room. That signals accountability. But now comes the harder part, adding someone who forces the entire unit to elevate. Imagine adding a vertical threat who demands double coverage. Imagine adding a long-body target who wins contested catches in the red zone. Imagine cutting that drop number in half next season. Suddenly, drives extend. Third downs convert. Explosive play rate jumps from 17th into the top 10. That's not fantasy, that's math and execution. And we are hours away from hearing Sean Payton and George Payton speak at the combine. Their tone, their emphasis, their wording, it's all going to matter. Are they going to downplay the issue? Or are they going to acknowledge it head on? Because Broncos country deserves transparency. You deserve to know that this front office sees the same things you see on Sundays. So now I turn it back to you again, not just about drafting a wide receiver, but about philosophy. Should the Broncos use a premium pick on a pass catcher to immediately reset the trajectory of this offense, or should they trust internal development and address it later in the draft? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear exactly how aggressive you think this team needs to be.